Hello, Dr. Nolan. This is Luis Perea. So this is my presentation on the article, analysis of the article, Medical Imagery in Ovid, Metamorphoses, Book 1, 190 to 1, and Livia's advice to Augustus. Okay, so let me start. So this was an interesting article that I read because it was very concise, it was very short, but it has a lot of compacted information. So these are basically the highlights. So basically, Ovid writes in Amores in 3:11-38, he makes an allusion to Metellus Macedonius's speech. And what is this speech about? It proposes mandatory marriage to stimulate the birth rate. Okay. Also, it was read in front of the Roman Senate and published and encouraged by Augustus himself, according to Suetonius. Okay. The author believes when writing Metamorphoses, Book 1, Ovid evoked another political debate in which Augustus was involved. Now, I guess to me it's interesting that this idea of mandatory marriage to stimulate the birth rate was something that Augustus was encouraging back at the time, when he became the first emperor. So here we have the Prima Porta statue of Augustus. Then let's see. Also, in this in this segment from Metamorphoses, Ovid is writing, and one of the things that the author makes allusion to is this idea that Jupiter announces to all gods that radical surgery is needed when the wickedness of mankind becomes incurable. So he's talking about, I believe the world is becoming evil and wicked. They don't respect the gods, that he had to do something to fix it. Now, Cassius Dio accounts in Book 55 of Roman history a detailed account of private discussion between Augustus and Livia, where she counsels him on how to deal with conspiracies, waking him sleepless with anxiety. So here, Livia makes use of medical imagery in chapter 17, section 1. And actually, I want to show the whole verse here from Ovid. So it's a translation. So here it says, when the gods had taken their seats in the marble council chamber, their king, sitting high above them, leaning on his ivory scepter, shook his formidable mane 3 times and then a 4th, disturbing the earth, sea, and stars. Then he opened his lips in indignation and spoke. I was not more troubled than I am now concerning the world's sovereignty, that when each of the snake-footed giants prepared to throw his 100 arms around the imprisoned sky. Though they were fierce enemies, still their attack came in one body and from one source. Now I must destroy the human race, whatever Nereus sounds throughout the world. I swear it by the infernal streams that glide below the earth through the Stygian groves. All means should first be tried, but the incurable flesh must be excised by the knife so that the healthy part is not infected. So here we can see the medical imagery, of using the knife and getting rid of the bad part. Mine are the demigods, the wild spirits, nymphs, fauns, and satyrs, and sylvan deities of the hills. Since we have not yet thought them worth a place in heaven, let us at least allow them to live in safety in the lands we have given them. Perhaps your gods believe they will be safe, even when Lycon, known for his savagery, plays tricks against me, who holds the thunderbolt and reigns over you. So this is the entire segment of the book according to Ovid. So I'm going to go back now to the slideshow. So here we have two things going on. Ovid's making allusion to Jupiter. Then we have Cassius Dio uh, making allusion to the conversation between Augustus and Livia. And Livia making that medical imagery. Then here we have the Latin. Non mihi qua totum nereus circumsonat orben perdegnum es mortale genus per flumina iuro infera subterra stigio laventia iuco conta perios temptanda sed immedicabile corpus esse residendum ne par sincera trahatur. So here we have the translation. Now, wherever Nereus runs the glove, with the sound of the sea, I need to destroy the human race, just as in the previous version. I swear by the rivers of the underworld flowing below the earth in the Stygian grove. Everything must be tried first, but the incurable body must be cut out with the sword, lest the undamaged part be infected. So again, this is this idea that Jupiter or Zeus is trying to get rid of the infected part of the human race as if he was using a knife. So we have this idea of medical imagery, and here we have Livia. Then in the article, the author also mentions Seneca in the Clementia. So he uses a shorter account using the medical profession as a model. And this is translated from Greek. I don't mean that you must forgive absolutely all wrongdoers, but that it is the reckless man, the one who interferes in everything, the nasty, the wicked, the man who involves himself in some desperate and persistent act of criminality. It is this sort of man whom you must eradicate. As one does, I suppose, also with totally incurable parts of the body, and as for the rest, anyone who goes wrong through youth or ignorance or folly or some other circumstance, whether willingly or not, to some of them you should give words of advice. Some you should set on the right path with threats, and others you should deal with in some other quite moderate way. So this is again the idea of getting rid of the bad part of this, right? Then here we have the passage on Metamorphoses 1 is one of the 3 points making reference to Augustus and Rome. So according to the author, he says, Olympus is called the Palatine of heaven, and the response of the gods to Jupiter's announcement of the plot to kill him is compared to the uproar amongst men when there is a conspiracy to spill Caesar's blood. So the way I see it, I'm assuming that this maybe is giving allusion to a possible coup or assassination against Augustus in this case. Here we have the Latin. Confremuere omnes studisque ardentibus ausum taliat subcun sic cum manus impias avevit, singine Caesario Romanon extingere nomen atonitum tantae subitu terrore ruinae, humanum genus est totusque pejoruit orbis. And the translation, they all shouted out and with burning passion demanded the man who had their acts like this. Just so when an impious band raged to drown the name of Rome with Caesar's blood, the human race was struck by sudden fear of such disaster, and the whole war shuddered. Should be war. Sorry. So these are the assumptions. So it implies a murderous conspiracy, and Ovid's readers seem to be forced by the context to think of plots against Augustus, as I mentioned before. So this is the idea that the author states in his article. Some Ciceronian passages as loci simile, in which Cicero, like Jupiter in Ovid, makes an explicit analogy between surgery on the body and on the body politics. So here the idea is that there's something wrong in politics in this specific society, so it is a good idea to get rid of that. And here we have the Latin, ego nolo quenquam sibem committere ut mortem multandus sit, tu etiam si commiserit conservandum putas. In corpore siquid eius modi es quod reliquo corpore noceat, it uri secarique patimur ut membrum aliquid potius quam totum corpus intereat, sic in rei publicae corpore, ut totum salum sit, quicquid es pestiferum amputetur. I don't wish any citizen to act in such a way that he needs to suffer capital punishment. You think he should be safe, even if he has acted so. If there is something in a body which would cause harm to the rest, we let it be cauterized or cut so that a limb perishes rather than the whole body. So in the body of the state, let whatever is diseased be amputated in order that the whole may be saved. So it's talking about this idea of, amputation. Okay, amputation to the body, amputation to the political body, right? To save it, to keep it intact. Here we have some of the medical tools used and this idea of amputation. Anyway, then also the author goes on to say, okay, there seems to be similarities between Seneca and Dio, but Dio depends on Seneca. Okay, so Ovid's text published in AD 8 is unlikely to be the source of the imagery and phrasing. So the author of this article is doubting this idea. The similarity of Ovid's diction and Dio's reveals they share a source, so that Dio's material comes through Seneca, who lacks the relevant phrasing, and the original source shared by Seneca and Dio must have been early one, already known to Ovid. So the author believes there's still some discrepancies between the sources, right? Especially between Dio and Seneca. So for Livia's advice to war, the indulgence of Augustus has to be made public. Therefore, Augustus himself may have told friends a memorable story about taking Livia's advice, and such a story may have become popular amongst the masses, I guess, a rumor. Okay. Then these are the author's impressions or conclusions. So he suggests there was a formal publication of the story, whether if a speech of Augustus in the Senate or a letter widely circulated or an account given to a curious analyst. Ovid uses the allusion, and he makes reference to a speech by Augustus in the Senate. So the gods are summoned to meet on the Palatine of heaven in a marmorious recessus, okay? And Suetonius states Augustus held meeting of the Senate on the Palatine, which was in the library or the temple of Apollo. Then the use of ensis, the word ensis in Metamorphoses 1190 may pick up on language in Ovid's model, since the word is not normally used for a surgical knife. And it provides in this context an idea of indiscriminate violence, but also provides with another detail shared by Livia's speech in Dio. So again, this is what the author is thinking. And here we have the translation of this from Greek, from the article. It is not everything that the sword can achieve, for it would be a great advantage if it could really make people see sense and persuade them, or actually compel them to like someone. But it would destroy the body of one man while alienating the minds of others. Okay. Then Livia uses imagery to argue for clemency. Jupiter doesn't show clemency to Lycaon for the example of wickedness and conspiracy by his account, and he will show no clemency to the rest of the world when his flood destroys Deucalion and Perea, as we all know it in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Therefore, Ovid describes the actions of Jupiter, and the Augustan readers may see the allusion as praising Caesar through the contrast. However, Ovid forced the analogy between the two figures on the reader, and the evocation of the apparently familiar advice may be intended to undermine the very claim to clemency that the princeps had, paraded or instigated. Now, strengths about this article. So I'm here. I'm indicating the strengths based on what I believe the author believes, and in my own, a little bit of this is my own opinion. So the article used primary sources, and this is my opinion, which makes the veracity strong and is, and if not at least trustworthy, because he makes he alludes, or he makes as uses as reference Ovid's Metamorphoses, Cassius Dio, Seneca. It cites Ovid's Metamorphoses, book 191. It cites two authors as reference, the possible conversation between Augustus and Livia, and cites narratives from Jupiter, so it attempts to use several sources. It makes reference to the policies from Augustus to encourage marriage amongst the population and to bring back the old traditions to Rome. So this is what I sense the most. The medical imagery seems to be well described and constructed. So I see a lot of the connections in the examples of the texts provided. And the weaknesses. So the article is too limited in the amount of information provided, and this is just my opinion. The article alludes on possible conversations between Augustus and Livia and uses a comparison what Jupiter may have said. And this is, this comes from Ovid, but it's still, even the author believes that the connections between Seneca and Dio are shaky. The argument by the author is based on quotes from different authors, Cassius Dio and Seneca. Too much speculation on what Ovid wanted to really state in his Metamorphoses. So the author, I believe, makes the connections or tries to find the connections, but at the end, he believes may not be very strong. And Ovid's text published in AD 8 is unlikely to be the source of the imagery and phrasing, according to the author. And thank you very much. So this is my analysis on this article. It was interesting to think about basically, a simile or a comparisons between, what doctors may use in surgery versus other kinds of abstract things such as politics or cleaning the war or things like that. So I see the parallels. So I think it's very interesting to view it from that perspective, to see how in antiquity different authors at the time were thinking about these specific tests. Thank you very much, and have a great summer, Dr. Nolan. Thank you. Bye-bye.